Hi, I'm Dr. Cindy Dupuy. I have a PhD in learning disabilities, and I do diagnostic evaluations, intervention, and a little bit of advocacy. And I'm also an adult with dyslexia and dysgraphia.
Hi, my name's Kim Sharman. I've worked with kids kindergarten through college, and I got interested in this particular topic that we're going to discuss today because of my own child and the signs I saw early on in her childhood that were difficulties with reading and writing.
Now, let's start by saying both the International Dyslexia Association and there's a website called understood.org have checklists. They have checklists that say, hey, does your kid do this? And we can give you the reference to those check sheets, right? But my question for you, Kim, is did your daughter's characteristics always hit those checklists? Did you ever look at those?
Um,
This was 20
I
years
did not
ago.
I did not know to look at those, but I knew because I had an older daughter that didn't have these learning disabilities. So my checklist was already in my head as far as something's not matching here.
So why don't you describe some of the things that you saw your daughter doing, which we've talked a
Oh.
little bit about before, but let's do it from a fresh, somebody's never seen that.
I would say right from the very beginning, I would say when I spent the same amount of time with this daughter reading and telling nursery rhymes and looking at books and all of that literacy type of stuff. But the difference with this daughter was that when I would say a nursery rhyme, she couldn't, even though I've said it 1,000 times, she couldn't remember the ending. She couldn't do the rhyme on the end of the nursery rhyme. She couldn't remember what was in the last sentence of the nursery rhyme. And she would smush the letters together and she would kind of mumble them.
What do you mean by that? Give me an example.
Um,
Like instead of saying baby, she'd say baby or baby.
no, like give me a nursery rhyme. Let's see. Roses are red, violets, roses are red, violets are
Jack and Jill
blue.
went up the hill to catch a pail or to get a pail of water.
Jack fell down and broke his
And Jill
said it
came
after,
tumbling.
after. Yeah, but like
She wouldn't even get the after because that actually I could hear that. So
yeah,
she would just like mumble something.
but like yeah, it was a lot of mumbling, or she was trying to fake it. You know, she wanted to get that rhythm of language. She wanted to rhyme, but it didn't work. So that was a big one. Also, we talked just recently about when she was in preschool. What is that test called, Cindy?
Which
This
the
when
symbol one?
yeah, the one where they drew a body.
Oh, there's one that's called draw a person IQ test, but I don't want to imply that if you simply draw a person, we've got your IQ score. But go ahead.
So basically there was something a little off, well, a lot off, because if the teacher draws a body and she puts one arm on one side, you should be, as a little preschooler, somehow get it a symmetrical area for the other side of the body to draw the arm. And that didn't happen.
Well, and actually, we're going to hit pause for just a second. And so I went and did the hunt down so everybody didn't have to wait for me to pull up the various pages of this. But I showed you a picture a long time ago, right? And
Yeah.
we talked about how your daughter's picture was dramatically different. Now, this one is not a horrible picture, except for the fact that the man that drew this, or the kid that drew this was 12. And so I expect a 12-year-old to recognize things like feet, and that our hands have more than 3 fingers typically, unless there's something unusual. Like, so you can have individuals that have atypical hand formation for various reasons, right? And so if I had a kid that had a hand that was missing fingers and they drew 3 fingers, I would be like, that makes sense to me. But for an individual that has 5 fingers, 4 fingers and a thumb, technically, I do expect them to recognize. Now, Kim, what's the other thing that stands out in this particular drawing for you?
The drawing's left hand is way longer than the right hand, and I mean the arm, and
Okay.
also they're not at parallel points, or
Okay.
parts of the body.
So you're saying all sorts of interesting things. And you know what stands out for me?
What?
Right here.
Oh, the nose and the two eyes are all together, and the ears.
Yeah, why does that stand out?
There's no differentiation that they're in separate parts of the face.
Yeah, so my eyes are up here and my nose is down
Yeah,
here. And in that picture, the nose is literally sitting between the eyes.
right.
Or it could be a three-eyed person. That's another opportunity or
Ah,
option or description.
fabulous.
But okay. So this one is not great, right? So there's some flags there. But so let's take a look at the next one. By the way, this is from a book that we students at Northwestern called The Green Bible, and it was by Helmer Michaelbest and Doris Johnson. You can still find some copies of it around, and we'll actually put up the link to the actual book if you can find it. It's a thick read, it's an old read, but it's got some really interesting classic examples in it. And the information she has about how to teach is timeless. So while some of her terminology has advanced, her comments on this is how you go backwards to teach a skill set is still spot on to this day and still an amazing reference. Okay, so Kim,
Wow.
unfortunately I put the little illustration down below, like I left that in there. What do you think of this drawing of a person?
That is just wild.
Kind of stunning, right?
It's stunning, and I would never guess dyscalculia from it, but yeah,
So
stunning.
so this is pretty severe. And by the way, Dr. Johnson, who I learned from at Northwestern, would bring her book up and would show us these, and we would talk about them extensively. I believe these were eyes, but it shows you the lack of organization that this individual had as to how a body worked. And we'll do another day, we'll do a whole thing on dyscalculia. We've got plenty of lessons that we can do on that.
Wait,
But
I just realized something. Those things under the eyes, I thought they were wrinkles, but I think those are supposed to be the eyebrows that are above the eyes.
or they could be the arms.
Oh, dear God. Okay.
We don't know. But what this shows me is the individual has somewhat of a sense of symmetry, meaning the left side tends to mirror the right side.
Yeah.
Okay. But doesn't have the spatial organization of what goes where, why does it go there, how do I think about organizing my body? Okay. So that one is really interesting. And then the last one, I think, is fascinating as well. And that's this one. And so, Kim, what do you think of this one?
Wow.
What stands out to you?
I mean, the hooks for the fingers are pretty amazing. The body that's just has no definition. The arms that have no, I don't know if those are supposed to be legs. There's no body in between the legs.
Yeah, so it would have made a dramatic difference if the individual had at least done that, because that would have identified that they recognize a torso as
Right,
being distinct from legs, right? And they
right,
didn't even recognize that.
right.
And then the fact that the fingers are bent backwards is also kind of interesting. So that could be, I recognize that my fingers bend, but I don't have a sense of what direction they bend.
Hmm.
Okay. And so very, very telling. Now I wanna look at one more, and it's in a slightly different category, but the reason I pulled this one up is because this is where Dr. Johnson would talk to us about, so what do you do with somebody that has drawings that are that far away from what's actually supposed to happen? Okay.
And these are not preschoolers. These are 12-year-olds.
These are 12-year-olds.
So you're not going to freak out if a preschooler draws this.
No, 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 no. But if a preschooler draws fingers going backwards,
Mm-hmm.
if a preschooler does not put eyes on, there are lots of things that, like, bing, something's going on, right? Do you
Okay.
recognize any of these elements from what your daughter drew?
What my daughter drew was a body where the body parts were not symmetrical on each side.
Okay, good. See, that's a great characteristic. So when we look at the more extremes,
Mhm,
it gives you like, wow, we've really got something really hugely significant going on here to, hey, well, here's what a normal drawing would look like, right?
mhm,
So what's relevant about this particular one is this student drew a shirt, okay? And so that's all that they could recognize of the collar and the sleeves, and then they knew that they had something down the front. And then the student was actually said, all right, let's take a look at a shirt. What makes up a shirt? Do you see the collar? Do we see we have a pocket? There are buttons
mhm,
down the front. What are the buttons for? What are these things called? Why do we have them? Where do they go? And so by talking through, here's
mhm.
how the body's made up, here's what a shirt is made up of, the student could eventually begin to represent those things and have a much better understanding of their actual body. Um, do you remember Dressy Bessie and Dapper Dan?
Yes,
Little dolls where it had the giant buttons and you got to button
yes,
them up and you tied a shoe and
yes.
you made a belt. They still make them. They're fabulous, right? They're a great motor coordination activity. It's a great way for kids to practice on a regular basis versus practicing when you're trying to get them out the door to go to school.
Man, you just reminded me of another early sign that I saw of my daughter always putting her shoes on the wrong foot, and every button was always off.
So
What's that?
so that again is part of that lack of symmetry, that lack of visual spatial awareness in her body.
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
Now, and that can be a huge range. So I don't intuitively know which is my left and my right. So if you ask me right now, I would actually have to think about the fact. And did you see what I did? I just like, this is the pen, this is the hand I would hold a pen in. That's the only way I know this is my right. I have to anchor my body some way because I don't intuitively know my left from my right.
And how do you explain that to someone? What that?
They don't have a great answer for that. There's questions about there's a structure in the brain called the corpus callosum where the left side talks to the right side and it goes through the middle. And there's some suggestion that there's something going on there. What I don't want to do is imply that you have to have reversals to be dyslexic or anything
No.
else. But what I'm implying is kids that don't remember which side of their bodies are which then struggle with a lot of things in life and in reading and in writing and a few other odds and ends. Okay.
Yeah. And the order chronology of events, number lines, all this stuff. Just that
Driving.
whole left right thing adds.
Yeah. I have students that come back in to me as young adults that are starting to drive and they're like, I hate driving because people will tell me to turn left and right and I don't know which way to go. And I said, mark your dashboard.
Yeah.
Put an R someplace that's super easy for you to see, or put an L up in the corner of the windscreen or in the
Mhm.
windshield so that you see, not windscreen, windshield, so that you have that symbol and it gives you an anchor point. Or do what I do. Ironically, my husband has dyslexia as well, but he knows his left from his right and I don't. So he has learned over the years to point. He doesn't tell me turn left or right. He tells me to turn and then tells me which direction to turn by pointing.
And I will tell you, so you parents don't give up hope. We practiced a lot in the car before driving, and we helped our daughter establish foundational points for north, south, east, and west. The ocean was west. Costco was east. And now she is the most clever. She finds every million different ways to get to different places. So she got that foundational knowledge somehow and turned it into becoming a great driver.
That
Direction.
cracks me up. So I started driving in Southern California and I always thought of the ocean as west.
Yes.
And then I went to Chicago to graduate school and I kept saying the water's on the wrong side. And people
Oh
were like, what are you
yeah.
talking about? And I'm
Yes.
like, that's how I anchor which direction I'm
Right.
going. Like,
Yeah. And I think that word anchor is important.
yeah,
Everybody needs an anchor.
okay. So I think we veered a little bit from warning signs and have gone into this great, like, But let's spend a couple minutes. What were some of the other warning signs besides the drawings and the
Well,
smushing words?
well, when my daughter entered first grade, they would ask her to write a C, and she had no idea what the heck a C was. And you know, the teacher kept her in from recess because she thought she was being stubborn. And then the teacher, so and then they actually gave her a test called a Topa Rosner test. Did I say it
Mhm.
right? And it was
Yeah.
a sound symbol association test, and she did very poorly on it. And finally, somebody confirmed what I had been knowing for the last couple of years.
Okay, so not a knowing how to identify letters, not knowing how to produce letters after having lots of practice,
Mhm.
having difficulty holding a pen and coordinating when drawing. Okay, often misrecalling or misproducing words. So my father still gives me a hard time about the fact that the thing above me is not a roof, it's a ceiling, because the roof is on the outside. And
Mm.
that happens to be my somewhat overly detail-oriented father, who I love dearly, but oh, he drove me nuts. But you also have kids that can't pronounce words like consonant or spaghetti,
Right, continent or
right?
mhm.
And so they can't replicate words. I've also run into kids where you ask them a question and they can't think of something to say, so they fill. So,
Mhm.
for example, one of the kids that I worked with, if you asked her a direct question, she would start singing the song "Who Let the Dogs Out,"
Mhm.
because she knew it generated humor by those around her and it gave her more think time and got her out of answering a question because she couldn't retrieve the answer that she wanted to. Okay.
I had a student once, and this is something, another thing you'll recognize is the w- one of the things we haven't really spoken about yet was being able to differentiate sounds. So when the student came in and said, "I found a cigarette outside on your street," and I said, "Oh, you mean a cigarette?" And she said, "Yeah, that's what I just said, cigarette."
Yeah.
So you may think, "Oh, she's just," I mean, this kid was not a little kid.
Right. Right.
So these are you'll start to notice those type, they thought, "Oh, Cindy, tell that thing, who do you think that you hear the most when you're a little kid?" That's the best one.
Who do you think you hear the most?
Whose voice do you hear the most when you're a little kid?
Mothers.
Oh, maybe you didn't teach me this. I learned this from someone else. No, you hear your own voice. So the problem is if you learn cigarette when you're little and you repeat that, you've told yourself that sound. So you're not going to learn the correct way to say cigarette. Or I had a high schooler that said ornament instead of ornament, but she was dyslexic and dysgraphic. She had heard that when she was a little girl and she never fixed it,
Wired it in deeply.
wired it into age 18.
Yeah. Yeah.
So those are also little things to be attentive to.
My staff gave me a hard time because I repeatedly mispronounce the names of places where I want to go visit. So, for example, there's an Incan set of ruins in South America that you've hiked to and that I've hiked to, known as,
Machu Picchu?
and I pronounce it as Machu Picchu.
What's wrong with that?
Isn't it? How do you pronounce it
Oh,
again?
oh, you're just saying you're putting the accent on a different syllable.
Well, I say it incorrectly, and sometimes I
Machu
will flip vowels and I will use an instead of an a or vice versa.
I don't know. That sounded pretty good to me, but I don't know. But yeah, you notice all those language things as a little kid, and if they have trouble differentiating an F sound from a V sound, or a B sound from a D sound, or a G,
Mhm.
you're going to start
Well,
to notice these things,
yeah.
and it
Okay.
means something.
Keep track of them, and if you don't see improvement and you don't see gains with support, that likely means something else is going on, and maybe it's time to ask some more questions
Yep.
or to at least keep track of those symptoms.
Yep.
All right, we'll see you again soon.
Okay.